What the Akashic Record field is a field of energy that holds the memory of all things. It's every thought that we've had, every experience, everything that is, and it is within the realm of all things. It's not just limited to the humans. It's the history or the experience of a drop of water. It can be a tree. It can be a blade of grass. And we don't really recognize the magnitude of what is all in this field of energy. It helps to plan and lay out and make sure that all of our helpers understand what the next step is, where we're going from this particular moment, and how all of the guides, all of our helpers come together to create the outcome of what certain situations need to be and how everything works together as a whole.
Hi, everybody. Welcome to the Ask Julie Ryan Show. It's where we blend spirituality and practicality to help you live a life of purpose and joy. We have Lisa Wetsel with us on the show today. Lisa channels the Akashic Records, and I have lots of questions for her about what kind of information can be found there and how they can assist a person on their spiritual path. Please remember to subscribe, leave a comment, and share this episode with your family and friends. Now let's go talk with Lisa. Lisa, welcome to the show. I'm so excited to have you join us today.
Well, I'm so excited to be here. Thank you so much for having me.
You bet. What are the Akashic Records?
So I like to answer this question in two ways, if you don't mind.
Sure.
I'm going to give you a brief breakdown, and then if you don't mind, I have my records open. I would like to have the guides give their explanation, if that's okay with you.
Sure.
Because they explain it a lot better than I can. I don't have a good definition that's elaborate. Mine's very basic. But what the Akashic Record field is a field of energy that holds the memory of all things. And it's every thought that we've had, every experience, everything that is, and it is within the realm of all things. It's not just limited to the humans. It's the history or the experience of a drop of water. All animals. It can be a tree. It can be a blade of grass. And we don't really recognize the magnitude of what is all in this field of energy. It helps to coordinate and create the synchronicities of all things. It helps to plan and lay out and make sure that all of our helpers understand what the next step is, where we're going from this particular moment, and how all of the guides, all of our helpers come together to create the outcome of what certain situations need to be and how everything works together as a whole. And so that's what my version is of the Akashic Records. And again, it's very limited, but I'm going to ask the Akashic Masters if they'll give their explanation, if you don't mind. Now,
That'd be great.
Channel, yeah. And I want to let you guys know, because sometimes people don't understand how I channel because I'm a little bit different. When I provide information, you're either going to notice that I close my eyes or else I look to the side. When I look to the side, basically, I'm just trying to shut my brain off, and I just kind of go into a zone. So if I look odd, that's why. I'm zoning out.
Okay.
But what we want you to understand is that the Akashic field and the masters that serve all are provided in order to create the consistency and the understanding of life as it's meant to be. What we want you to understand is that the guidance that's provided by the Akashic field is provided to all. And what we want you to know is that the simple question can provide a simple answer. If the human chooses to ask, then we provide the information that is needed in order for the human to move forward in their footsteps. But what we also want you to understand is that we hold the records to all things, which also consists of the soul's contracts, the soul's agreements, and what the universal plans are that create the future and what is to become. We also want you to understand that our information is provided to all levels of consciousness in all dimensions and all existences. We want you to understand that there's no stone left unturned. We want you to recognize that we are the ability to hold all things, all knowledge, all wisdom, all experiences. And we provide this information for you today so that you can recognize that the magnitude of your life is more than just what the human process is. It's a magnitude that is much grander than what the human can conceive of. And this is what we want you to understand today. So I don't know if that explained much more than what I said.
Yeah. It just kind of expanded on it a little bit.
Yeah.
I would say.
Yeah. Yeah. And I also just want to kind of, expand on also that, we as humans, we also don't recognize the roles that the Akashic Records masters play and in the way that they assist us in our everyday life. And when we can get down to really truly understanding that, my soul that resides within me has a specific plan, and it also is used as a tool to create the outcome for many individuals. It's not just about me. And when we understand that the Akashic field has a team, basically, that understands that, okay, on January 15th at 5:00, this specific event has to happen. So, hey, you guys down there, all of you guides, get yourself in gear because we have to create this event to happen. And then we as humans don't recognize that, maybe it's in November before January, and then all of a sudden I feel a little tap on my shoulder that takes me down a direction and may introduce me to something new that I wasn't aware of, that created a certain interaction that would become a grander thing in the outcome of what is meant to be on this January date, whatever I said. I think it was the 15th. So we don't always recognize that our guides work in a much grander way than just for me and just for you. It works on this huge scale that is beyond what any of us can understand, and how things have to be set up in order to have that certain outcome. But what we also may not always understand is that when we hear that little voice in our ear that says, everything's going to be okay, or you need to go to the left, or you need to get up and move now. All of these little signals and these little things that we are told and that we hear, if we really truly pay attention, we'll recognize that it's all in the grand plan, the grand scheme, and how the Akashic Records and all of our guides work together to create what is.
All right. That's a lot to unpack. I have about 15 questions.
Yeah. And of course, I have about 20 years of being able to grasp this. So
Yeah. That have been spawned, I guess, is that the word, that have come out of, what you just mentioned. First of all, are the Akashic guides different from the regular spirit guides, different from, like our main spirit guide, our guardian angels, other guides, deceased loved ones, and other spirits that are guiding us, God himself, and, whatever you believe as far as that goes? Are the Akashic guardians kind of like librarians?
Well, and again, yes and no. Yes. But to answer your question, they are separate. It is separate. And so the way that the way they tell it, they explain it to me is that the masters of the Akashic field are basically, I always see it like a control tower, like all of those little masters, because obviously they break it down to put it in the way that we silly humans can understand things.
Right.
So I always see it more or less like the structure of running a business. And in the sense that you have the masters, the ascended masters, the great ones, and, these that are kind of overseeing the whole program. And then we have different levels of understanding. So then you have somebody, I always call them somebodies, the masters, the guides, that recognize, okay, I'm sitting in front of my little monitor here and I see that this has to happen. So, hey, Angel Bob, you need to make this happen. So I'm connecting you and giving you guys all of the information. You need to help this little soul out, make sure that it knows what it's supposed to be doing and it's calling for help. So you guys get down there and start helping the human recognize that there's a specific plan. Now, obviously, that's very humanized description, but it's not that necessarily those masters are the ones that are tapping us on the shoulders. But the masters are basically what is coordinating and helping to lay out how and what needs to happen with all of the other guides that assist in this grand scheme of things, so that we can make sure that what we're supposed to do is we'll stay on track.
Almost like a director in a movie, too, making sure all of the stars and the extras and the props and the stunt guys and all that stuff are there to shoot a scene.
Yeah.
And I love the air traffic control analogy. I think that's perfect, too, which leads me to ask, I've got something going on. You've got something going on. We're going to interact today in this chat that we're having. So are the Akashic Masters then sending information to me, to my guides, to you, to your guides, so that scheduled on this day at this time to talk about these different things? When I was prepping for this talk, were they guiding me on what some of the questions were to ask?
Absolutely. And recognize that we're always with you. What we want you to understand is that this specific conversation that the two of you are having is creating the consciousness and the understanding for the individuals to listen, to hear the magnificence of who they are. What we want you to understand is that this specific message is being given to all that are to hear, so that they can see the truth that is of our words and not of the man-made words. So it's very intentional. And, and it's funny because, whenever I open my records, I say a protection prayer before I open it. And then I have a prayer that I open the records with specifically for me. But I always try to get in that place. And I'm sure you understand, we got to quiet our minds a little bit. And I could feel the connection with you very clearly. And I have the ability to trust that my guides are going to guide us to what they need to have said and to have heard. And that's where the part of you and I come together, to where we have this little bit of understanding of surrender and allowing the words to come through us that need to be heard.
Right.
We become the mouthpieces.
When you say you open the records, what does that mean? Is there a procedure that you do? Is it instant? Does it just stay open till you close it? How's that work?
All of that. Everything.
Okay. All the above.
Yes. Yes, all of the above. Well, so when I started, the basic way, for the way that I learned how to open the Akashic Records, because there's different ways. Like Edgar Cayce would go into a trance. There's different ways that people access the records, but the way that I was taught was by saying a specific prayer. And this prayer, it has a little bit of a history. It started in Mexico and then was brought into the United States. And then my teacher, the teacher of the teacher of the teacher, was handed down this specific prayer. And so when I learned how to open or access the Akashic Records, I used that specific prayer to open them up. Now, I still use the prayer. And if I
say the prayer, and then you can feel your energy shift in your body.
Absolutely.
Is that how? And so, is the prayer short? Is it long? Is it?
Well, it's not too long. It depends. There's two different prayers: one for opening my own records, and one for opening somebody else's records. And the other one for opening other people's is a little bit longer than it is for myself. But yes, whenever I say the prayer, then, and there's a procedure to it. It's not just saying the prayer, but when I start saying it, I can feel the energy. I'm very sensitive, and I feel the energy start to spin. And then it basically, it ends up in my heart area, and I could feel it around my heart. And so I could recognize, when I'm in the records, because I can feel that energy.
So if you're working with multiple clients throughout a day or doing multiple interviews or whatever, do you say the prayer every time before you start the conversation with each individual person? So it's a prayer that's just specific for that person?
Every time.
Okay.
Yeah.
And then when you're done talking with them, then do you close the records? Do they close on their own?
No, I close them specifically. So, like I do private sessions, and I do pressure. Oh my gosh, I can't talk. I do sessions every day, 6 days a week, or sometimes 7. But it is the point of where, if I'm getting into your records, specifically Julie Ryan's records, then I'm going to say the prayer to open your record specifically. And then as we end the session, then I'm definitely going to close your records and make sure that your energy is out of my field. And I go through the extra cleansing process, because I don't want to open, the next person that's after you. We need to make sure that I'm not giving them your information, or,
Right.
the person that was before you. We want to make sure that it's an open and a closing, and an open and a closing, and an open and a closing.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right. You talk about the synchronicities of all things. Where does free will come into play?
Recognize that free will is a significant part of the human nature. We want you to understand that all humans have the ability to make the choices and decisions that are regarded as the mind's thoughts. But what we want you to understand is that the ability that the human has to listen to the truth of who they are and what is to transpire is a significant one. We want you to understand that free will is typically created due to the constructs that have been put within the human's construct, so that they would make choices or decisions from the experiences, the fears, or the examples that they'd been given throughout their lifetime. But what we want you to know is that the ability to follow the synchronicities, or the paths that are meant for the specific individual, is pushed and guided by the synchronicities of the universe, and also the ability for the guides to help walk or show the individual the path that is needed.
And is that roadmap drawn out before we incarnate, before we're born?
Recognize it. The path of the human is synchronized centuries before the existence of what the current life would be. And that's a good question, because a lot of people don't really get that. We're here right now, so we have a tendency to think, this life was created, at the point of conception, or the point that I was born, and then it's going to end at that time. But if you really truly think about all the experiences that we have, how would I be born to my parents if my great grandparents never met? And and how, if you really look at the magnitude of how where we are at this moment had to be created, it had to be created lifetimes ago. And the plans have been there, for specific outcomes to happen and to transpire to create the life that we're living in this particular moment. So again, my parents had to meet, they had to be born, grandparents, and it goes down our lineage to get us to this point to where we are today. And they're laughing. I'm hearing them laughing at me and saying, except for when that thing called free will comes in. So, but what the point is that the plans have been made, but because of our free will, and we understand this, we hear it all the time about the different timelines of the way that we can maneuver around, with the different choices that we make, then there's different outcomes that can happen that kind of change the course. But basically what the main goal is for our guides is to have the completion done the way that it's needed to be done. We just may take some detours along the way.
That's what I was going to ask. If a lot of the time we'll get the same outcome, but perhaps through a circuitous route that wasn't originally planned, but we still get there. And it's all about what the soul wants to explore and experience in this lifetime is what I've been told.
Absolutely.
So I get that our current lifetime was arranged centuries ago. I understand that. So does that mean that all of our past lives also were arranged centuries ago?
No.
And then they led to the current lifetime with all of the players in all those past lifetimes. Am I understanding that correctly?
They're saying recognize this as so.
Okay. So then there are schools of thought that believe that we live multiple lifetimes concurrently. How does that come into play? And is that true? Do we live multiple lifetimes concurrently?
Okay, I'm gonna start this question with saying I am not saying that I have all the answers. I am not saying that anybody's right or wrong because we all have
No, I know. Oh yeah, absolutely.
But they're saying, but what we want you to know that as you recognize who you are as a human being at this particular time, you are living the life and the existence that is meant for your specific soul to be here to have that. What I'm seeing is like this big explosion. It's like to see the whole picture of what is meant for this particular lifetime and this particular realm. But what we want you to understand is that there's many different dimensions of consciousness. And we also want you to recognize that there's many different planes and realms that can be created at the same specific time. But what we want you to understand is that your soul's existence on the earth at this particular time is what is of the most importance, as the experience in different timelines and experiences that are not within this particular dimension are not relevant to you as a human being at this particular time. Okay. And again, I just repeating the words.
Let's say we're having a lifetime in a galaxy far, far away.
Mm-hmm.
And I would think that perception of that lifetime would be what our focus would be on in that incarnation, even if it's happening concurrently with the human one.
Right.
So whatever lifetime is happening, even if there are multiples happening concurrently, which makes my brain want to explode because I don't understand it from a human frame of reference.
Yeah.
But it's going to be, you're in some galaxy far away. That's going to be what your spirit or your soul wants to experience and explore in that lifetime too.
Thank you for understanding that.
Yeah. Well, just trying to get clear on that. Yeah. Okay. Fascinating. Okay. So you've mentioned that since they're air traffic controllers and they're bringing together all of the different variables that are needed to achieve an outcome of something that our spirit wants to explore. I use soul and spirit interchangeably. I use spirit more than soul. Soul to me sounds religious, like a Catholic girl, with 12 years of Catholic schools. So I tend to use spirit more than soul. But if that's the case, and I tend to believe that it is, because that's what you're channeling, does that mean that the Akashic Records are not just past things that have happened? Do they involve present things as well and future events?
Absolutely.
Okay.
Yeah. And that's another thing that, a lot of people they think about the records only happening from the second into the past, but they also hold what is the projected future. They hold the records of all things. And, what they're saying, what we want you to understand is that the idea and the thought of what needs to occur is the idea of understanding how to project into the days to come so that all relevant events will happen and transpire in a way that is of congruent nature to have that specific outcome. And so, again, when we talk about the records being able to provide the information for all things, it is it's not like they're just holding everything. It's like they hold the records to this is what is supposed to happen. These are the events that are occurring, and we have to have this specific situation happen at this particular time in order to create the certain outcome. So with that being said, is that yes, they hold the records to what is the past, present, and future, but we all know that the future can change. And so they're laughing, I'm hearing, they have the blueprint, and they understand it's all laid out, and it's like they understand, what needs to happen in order to create the outcome. But sometimes there's, like I'm looking at the building a building and all of the ins and outs that can happen to delay a building or, prevent it from actually being constructed. So there are things that happen that are planned out that are for the future, but may change.
What's the best way that we can follow our guidance, recognize its guidance, and then follow it so that we are on the path or are on the blueprint of what we've wanted to come in and explore?
Yeah, understand getting out of the mind. This the mind's control that it, and I think they said it earlier about, the way that the free will. And, a lot of times that, we're so stuck in our heads and we're such decision makers that, that we have to look at a situation and evaluate and then make the most logical answer or follow the easiest path. And sometimes it may not be the easiest, it may be the hardest that our mind creates us to take. And so when my guides are jumping in again, when we begin to recognize, when we as humans can allow those mind's thoughts to be set aside, and we can start hearing that inner voice, that inner knowing, begin to be more aware of when we feel a touch on the shoulder that's trying to push you in a different direction or show us a different side, when we're repeatedly seeing, like numbers and symbols and things that are trying to get our attention. When you get out of your head and you really learn how to kind of go more with the flow and allow things to transpire the way that they're meant to without trying to push and change and force, you'll begin to find that you become more connected and in tune with the truth of who you are. And, I always use this channeling thing, which you are aware of as well. How do we channel? The second that we start feeling something come in, we shut that mind off and allow it to flow through us. And if we could learn how to do that on a daily basis, you'll stay more in alignment with who you are, and you'd receive the messages from your guides, and you would recognize and you'd learn how to tell the difference between the mind and what's being said to you or what's guiding you.
Well, in my experiences, I can hear communication coming into my head and I'm well aware of what's going on. It's not like I'm in a trance or something. Obviously, you're not either, but we hear guidance coming in. And I think we, especially in the Western world, perhaps throughout the whole entire world, maybe not in indigenous cultures that are living in the Amazon or someplace like that, but we're taught to be analytical thinkers.
Absolutely.
We're taught to be critical thinkers, they call it in the schools, and we're taught to turn off that intuitive voice that we all have.
Yeah.
And I think that it's probably, I would go so far as to say most likely come down through all the civilizations and religions and great cultures of the world as a way to control the masses. Don't follow your gut, follow what we're telling you that you need to do in order to have a certain outcome of whoever's the leadership, whoever's in charge.
I agree 100,000%. Everything that you just said. Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. And, the thing, and, and where we keep talking about this fifth dimensional thing and, moving in from, going from the 3D world to the fifth dimensional world. And this is
so
exactly.
Explain what that means to people that have no clue what that means.
Okay. So the 3D world is basically more of the mind's construct existence. It's more of this heavy, denser energy that we're existing within, that creates the fear and the anxiety, power struggles, the living in the trauma, the things that bring us down and that are heavy. And as we're shifting into this newer dimension of consciousness, which is the fifth dimension, it's helping to break down those old constructs so that we can live more free in the truth of who we are. But exactly what you said, we've been so conditioned as human beings to live certain ways. And, for thousands and thousands of years, I mean, you look at, the idea of slavery and the control and the power struggles just around that specific thing, just slavery, and how being a slave, takes away your identity, how you become subservient to another master, and how the master is the person that's in the power and the control, and how you belittle a human life. So if you take this construct, just this simple idea, and you begin to recognize just how those basic factors get ingrained in our brain, that there's a difference between you and me because I have this and you don't. And so when you look at these little bitty things that have been passed down through centuries of the way that we treat each other and the way that we look at each other and the way that we live our lives, because this is the way that society says this is how it's supposed to be. It's created that brain construct that is totally living from our minds. It's living from the head. So the choices and the decisions that we're making are either because I'm living my life like this because I want to be accepted by society and this is what they say I have to do. It may not be that it's making me happy. It may not be that it's fulfilling my purpose in my life, but this is what society says, so this is what I'm going to do. And so by breaking down those constructs, that conformity that we've all been put in, then we find a freer way of being, which is moving us into this fifth dimensional construct that allows us to live in a way that is the more natural, pure way of who we actually are as human beings, and not living under the umbrella of all of these other individuals, societies, all of the religions and all of that stuff that has put labels on us and basically pushed us in a way of being so that we would fit their constructs and not the truth of who we are.
Well said. And I'm thinking too, when it comes to slavery, I live in the Deep South. So, my first thing I'm thinking of is the slaves on the plantations. But in reality, slavery's been around since the beginning of time. In all of the ancient cultures, there were slaves. And then we get Moses freeing his people, from Egypt. And we've got all these things throughout the millennia. And even today, we're all slaves in some way because to a government or to a religion. I'm thinking of the whole COVID stuff. You had to stand 6 feet apart. You had to wear a mask in certain places. You had to do this kind of a thing. In some countries, they weren't allowed outside of their homes. And so is that a form of slavery? You bet it is. But the master is the government.
Yeah, but I mean, let's just break it down to the everyday. Are you in a relationship? And in that relationship, are you sacrificing yourself for the wants and the desires of somebody else? Are you living your life trying to keep somebody else happy when you may not be specifically really truly happy, but you're trying, make sure that Bob is happy, and he wants to do this. I don't really want to go, but I'm going to do it anyway because this is what he wants. He doesn't ever give back to me, but I'm going to make sure that he stays happy because I'm insecure in this relationship and I feel like I have to have it to give myself security and meaning and purpose. So it's the most basic things that we make, the choices and decisions that we make every day. If you really start breaking down to where I'm making this decision because, my mother told me that this is the way that I'm supposed to be. When I was 2 years old, my mother said, don't say those things or don't talk like that because people don't like it. And so I'm constantly at 60 years old, I'm looking at, I have to be careful about what I say because I don't want to disrupt anybody. I don't want to make anybody unhappy. And so when we really look at the magnitude of breaking these things down, it's the everyday life. It's the choices and decisions that you make throughout the day that if you really look at why am I making these choices and decisions, then you'll begin to recognize, I'm making this choice and decisions because the pastor said that I needed to, or else I'm going to hell. Or that my mother said, I won't be accepted if I tell anybody that I talk to dead people. All of these little things that we really truly don't think about, that it really dictates our lives. And so where we are today is looking at ourselves and beginning to really recognize that we're being put in these situations and these things are starting to come up. This old conditioning is coming up to us for us to really look at and recognize, maybe I don't really believe this. Maybe I've always looked at this situation this way because my mom, my dad, or my teachers or somebody put that idea in my head. And so I just thought that way it was. Maybe I need to shake this up a little bit and recognize that that's not really who I am and it doesn't make me happy. So now I'm going to make some changes. And so what the interesting part about all of this is going back to, who we are as spiritual beings, is that the more that we can deprogram that conditioning, the more that we come into this natural state of who we are as a spiritual being, and our mind becomes more open and receptive to becoming more intuitive and listening to our guides and recognizing when all those signs and symbols are being presented to us, because we're not living in our heads anymore. We're more open, and that channel of communication can come to us more freely.
You're making examples, and I'm hearing examples coming into my head, and I'm thinking, okay, I can change that ingrained thing in my brain not to wear white after Labor Day. I still don't do it, but I know it's stupid.
Yeah.
But I still don't do it, and I don't carry a white purse after Labor Day, if I'm dolled up or something. But on the other hand, I pay my taxes, and I just renewed my car registration to get the little sticker for my license plate yesterday online.
Yeah.
Because I know if I don't do that, I'm going to, get pulled over, and then it's going to be a problem for me.
Yeah.
So it's interesting when I heard you say, well, we can make decisions whether we want to do something or not. Yeah. And there are still things that we're expected to do to live in our day-to-day societies, like renewing my car registration. I was just thrilled that I can do it online, and I don't have to go stand in line at the DMV to go pay for that. And I appreciate that they've become technologically savvy, in my county and in my state.
Yeah, but I'm sorry, I'm going to interrupt you, and I didn't mean to, because I've had this come up before, and it's like, well, okay, Lisa, you're giving us a scenario, but how is the world going to turn? Well, we're still going to have a brain. We're still going to think. We still have to follow the rules. I mean, we can't go drive on the wrong side of the road. I mean, you still have to stop at the red lights. I mean, you still have to function. But what the difference is the way that we present information, the way that we see and that we view things. And because we will become more connected to one another and recognize that, maybe there's not a separateness between you and me, because you and I are from the South, and it's being from the South, you understand that term, being a Yankee. People in the South don't like Yankees. I love the New Yorkers. Okay, so it's like, okay, so maybe.
And I am a Yankee. I grew up in Ohio.
Okay,
so I am
just live in the South.
Yeah. I lived in the South for a long time, but yeah, I am a Yankee.
But you understand that, it's breaking down these constructs that keep us separate, keep us in this idea of smallness. The idea of just being controlled in the everyday. It's this thing of being ingrained that I'm inferior because maybe I had a childhood that was I was bullied as a child. And so I have this belief system or this feeling now that keeps me small because of the way that I was treated. Those are the types of things that we're talking about breaking.
Right. And when we do that, we change our perspective.
Absolutely.
Which changes what we attract, which changes the path that we're going to take.
Yeah.
Which perhaps is more like the blueprint that we've figured out. I love this centuries ago. I never heard that before, but it makes sense if you think about all the little strands of the spider web that have to come together in order to give you the experience that we want to have in this incarnation. It's fascinating.
Yeah, it is.
All of it. So when people look at Akashic Records and they get guidance from Akashic Records, I've heard people say, well, how is that different from the Bible or from other holy texts?
It's not anything the same.
I know. But I've had that question asked to me. Have you?
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
So,
spiritual text or the Torah or the Bible or, the Quran or things like that. How, I guess a better question is, how does that information guide us in perhaps a more elegant manner than reading the holy texts that give it guidance too?
Yeah, they're laughing and saying again, because those texts are man-made. They're saying, we are not. Like, no. They're saying, but what we want you to understand is the difference between the creation of the written book is the regurgitation of words, thoughts, and concepts that men created that did not come from us. But what we want you to understand is that the concept of the universe and all that resides within the universe is much different than the human realm. And this is what we want you to understand.
But are there nuggets of wisdom found in those books, as in pretty much every kind of a whatever we're going to read?
Absolutely.
Yeah.
No, there is. But the thing about it is, though, is this the way that it's interpreted. And again, it's the understanding that men are one is what the truth is. And what we want you to understand is that when there is any form of separateness or division that is created between one man and another, there is false. Fault or false.
Big statement there.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But the main thing is that, we understand that, there's so many things that are out there. And again, going back thousands and thousands of years that separate one human from another, that cause division. When in the universal construct, we're all the same. We're all one. In this crazy saying, we're all one. It's this intertwining. And again, you talked about the web, the web between my soul and your soul, the web that is between the soul that, is between you and me and the person that lives in Georgia or France or Arabia or wherever it may be, just because that our lifestyles may be different, or because our experiences are different, or because our skin colors are different, or even if our religions are different. Underneath the core, we're all one. And the universe created us to be this intersecting huge web of oneness. We are all connected. That crazy, crazy saying that, that the universe keeps saying, and we say, so many people say, but they really don't truly understand the concept of this energetic pattern that is between soul to soul to soul to soul. And it doesn't matter if you're a human or if you're an animal or if you're a plant or what it is, we're all connected with this grand scheme of this energetic pattern that holds us together as one. And so if we can really truly understand that concept instead of the words that say I'm better than you or you're less than me, then they're saying, then you'll begin to recognize what the truth is.
Back to the air traffic controller example that you mentioned earlier, when somebody experiences something horrific, loss of a loved one, horrible car accident, hurricanes and floods and tornadoes and all that we've been through here in America in the Southeast in the last couple of weeks. Are they orchestrating those events as well to help the individual, you or I or whomever, explore and experience whatever their spirit came in to explore and experience?
That recognize we are. And what we want you to understand is that on the spiritual realm, that the truth and the consistency of the human is the soul that lies within. And so what we want you to understand is that there are many experiences that souls need to have in order to shift and change the consciousness of the human being that they reside within. We want you to understand that there are many, many cases of turmoil that individuals have to go through in order to create the understanding of what is needed or what is to be the end result. So what we want you to understand is that although the human mind can't fully understand or develop the concept of what is happening, we want you to understand that all souls know and are exactly in alignment with who they're meant to be.
Okay. All right. How about our exit points? Do we have that ahead of time? Is that in our blueprint? That some people talk about there are multiple exit points we can choose. Others say, my philosophy is happy, healthy, dead. That's how I want to go out. Happy, healthy, dead. Well, and I say that all the time. I mean, that's how I want to go. And is it something that is predestined and then we can choose not to do it? Do we have exit points that are kind of like, you go in a stadium or you're on an airplane and you're looking to see where are the exits in case something happens and I need to parachute out of this plane? How does that work?
What we want you to understand is that an exit point is the opportunity for the human to leave the physical realm. But what we want you to understand is that the soul's desire to stay on the earth or within its specific human in order for it to live its fullest capacity, which is needed for the growth, is given the opportunity to complete the transition. But what basically meaning that, the soul is meant to be here to have its experiences and go through what it needs to go. So if it's time for, like the soul has completed its mission, then, okay, well, it doesn't need the human body anymore. So there's the opportunity, to leave or to expire. But what we want you to understand is that there's also many times where there are accidents, that things can happen in the human realm that create an existence that can transpire sooner than what is planned. And this is also the opportunity that the human has. So the other thing, people have the tendency, that old saying, there are no accidents. Well, yes, there are. Because again, we have free will. And, everything that is inside of us could be saying, don't go behind that truck. Don't drive behind the truck. You need to pass them or you need to go down. And you're just going, oh, I'm fine. And then something falls off the truck and hits you. It's, how many times that we've had that inner voice that says to do something and we ignore it. And then something happens that wasn't a fun result. How many times have we heard the stories that, something tragic happened, 9/11. And how many stories did we hear about somebody didn't go to the office that day because they didn't feel good, or they had an inner voice that, delayed them or did something that they didn't show up. If we choose to continue to not listen to all of these signs and we make these choices through our mind, our rational reasoning, then we can put ourselves in situations that can hurt our physical bodies. And the physical body may not be able to survive, or it may damage it in a way that wasn't necessarily in the plan. And it just changed the outcome, of what our human design or our plan was at the time that we came into the world. You're saying, so however, we want you to recognize that the human has the opportunity to continue on in the way that the soul is required, or else they can choose a way to leave if they want to. So we still have the free will to leave. If you choose to, maybe you're in such a frame of mind that you you have convinced yourself that you don't want to continue to live, and so you take your own life. Was that destiny, or was it meant to be, or was it a choice that I made from my mind? Obviously we would have to look at, that whole scenario. But if it was a choice that I made from mine, I just took an exit, that really wasn't planned, but it was an exit. And so again, what I keep hearing, if I haven't made it clear yet, is that there is a plan for the soul. And the soul is going to do everything that it can to continue on its journey in the specific vessel that it chooses to. If it's time for that contract to end, then the soul will allow that to end. If that makes sense.
It does. And do souls or spirits choose to leave kind of like, I'm volunteering for duty because my loved ones are going to be able to explore and experience what it's like to lose a child, lose a loved one very unexpectedly. Somebody having like a car accident and they don't make it, kind of a thing. Are there situations like that where somebody kind of volunteers for the good of multiple other loved ones?
Absolutely. Absolutely. And again, it's so hard to understand when you're grieving. You can't see that specific picture. But I have it said all the time, whenever I'm doing readings for people, whatever the situation is, that it's this whole scenario, it's whole contracts, and as we make these agreements, for these specific things to happen, so that we have these experiences, it's also the way that we handle it as humans. My brother passed away when I was 29 years old, and it was tragic. But I also saw that his death was the greatest gift that I could have ever had. It changed my life. It brought me to where I am sitting here right now. It changed my understanding about what happens after we die. I can either look at it in that way and see the grander, bigger picture of it, or else I could have sat in my misery and my sorrow and kind of be stuck into what was me. And I know that sounds very blasé, because that's not what I mean. But, it's so hard when people's minds take them to this place of darkness, I don't like the word pity, but maybe it's self-pity or victimhood, because that's not a compassionate word, because I'm trying to say this with all the compassion that I can, because I understand what it's like to be the person, that loses somebody and these horrific things that happen. But our mind can take us to very dark places when it's not meant to be that way. And, when we can understand how to separate from the mind and see that spiritual perspective of what has happened and why, then it can change our whole viewpoint and who we are as human beings to become more whole and compassionate as that spiritual being.
Well, and I think the most important word that you just said was perspective.
Yeah.
We can change our perspective on something, and how that, at least what I teach, how that it's an accurate perspective, or it's a perspective in a higher vibration, is it feels better.
Yeah.
Either feels neutral, or it feels like, okay, it's feasible, even if I don't understand it. Is it feasible? Yeah. Will I understand it when I get back to heaven? Yeah. Okay. Another question about the guides. Were they human at one point, all of them?
No.
Or have they ever been human?
Recognize that some have been, but most have not. What we want you to understand is that the existence of the masters within the Akashic field are simply energetic beings that have existed in this way for eons. What we want you to understand is that as the Akashic field was formed at the beginning of time, so were the masters. And this is who they are and what they reside as. And so what I've always seen them as is that, it's basically, when the universe was formed, these energetic bodies were created. And how I always see it is, it's like when these dust particles came into the universe, they started spinning and created this electromagnetic body, this little energy body. And then the bodies created a consciousness. And that's that's how I see our masters. I see them as this energetic body, that was created at the beginning of time. And so they're saying the majority, most significantly, the understanding of the masters of the Akashic field have not been human. But what we also want you to understand is that there are some souls that were created to be in the human field and then elevate up to higher levels of consciousness within the Akashic realm that serve as different sources of guides and support. Okay, so
go ahead. Yeah, I got a question for you on that, but go ahead.
There's different types of guides and masters that are within that Akashic field. And so again, if we look at, the original description of, you have the guides that are basically the CEOs of the company. And then when you start looking downward and for the different missions, it's like the lower, they're calling it the lower realm. And so like the Akashic field has different dimensions within it as well. And the lower realm is more of that, of the guide nature. So it's more of those things that have lived in different forms, because it doesn't have to be just human, but different forms that transition up. They're saying they graduate up to becoming these guides within the field.
So it's kind of like a spiritual organizational chart. You see in a company, right?
Yeah.
It's like org chart. You got the CEO, you got the president, you got the COO, CFO, CMO, all that other stuff.
Yeah,
okay.
And then and you have the people that do put the data entry in, and you have the supervisors that make sure that everything's done. And so it's that's the easiest way to describe it.
But one's not better than the other.
Absolutely,
they just have different roles.
Absolutely,
I understand it. Yeah.
Absolutely. Yeah.
So the Akashic guides are advising my main spirit guide, Pope Clement VI, to advise me and helping him. So when he showed up, that was probably in my blueprint. And again, I'm gonna ask you to give me more information here in a second. But that's how I'm understanding it. That they're, let's say he's an EVP, but they're like at the level above him going, hey, Clement, go advise Julie.
Yeah. But they're saying, but we also want you to recognize that there's other entities that can come to you without our supervision.
Such as?
Galactic beings.
All right. We'll get to that in a minute.
This is a neat question. I wasn't expecting that answer.
All right. Well, I have. Well, you know why? Because I have a question on my sheet for you about galactic beings.
Oh, okay.
Yes, I was going to ask you about them anyways, and they already knew that. So let's back up for a minute. Have you always been able to access the Akashic Records? You said that you trained, but did you have some of this as a little girl? Do you come from a spiritual family? What's the trajectory that's gotten you to this point? Give us a summary.
No, and no. I'm a little bit different than a lot of people, because as a child, I didn't realize anything. I don't remember. At 16 years old, I had a spiritual experience driving down a highway. I saw Jesus in the sky, and I was 16. I didn't go to church. I wasn't a religious person, and it had to do with my parents and some religious traumas. So we didn't do that. So I wasn't raised.
Is there a country music song about Jesus take the wheel or something?
Oh yeah. This isn't the same.
Okay.
Yeah. So, but anyway, so at that point, I didn't recognize. All I knew was that for some reason something was trying to get my attention, but I just ignored it. I never told anybody about it, and so it happened, and it was one of those, oh my God, what's happening moment. It's like, oh my God. So it was this crazy experience, but it's like I was too embarrassed. I didn't want to tell anybody that I had this experience. And so it just kind of forgot about it. And then when I was 20, I had an experience with my grandfather passing, and he came into the room, and I recognized him in the room, and had a couple of instances like that, but it still wasn't like, oh my gosh, I have this strange power. And, it was just kind of like these weird things that just kind of happen and then just ignore it. Because again, I wasn't exposed to anything like this, so I didn't know it was a thing. Well, then I went to massage therapy school in 1996. And the way that I was taught to do massage therapy was to become more intuitive and listen, shut your mind off, and start listening to those words that come to you to help you to figure out how you're supposed to treat this body. And so at that point, I started having these experiences. And then I ran across a lady that taught I actually became the director of the massage therapy school, and one of my instructors taught the Akashic Records, and I'd never even heard of them before. And so I just kind of thought, this will be fun. We'll just do this just because. And so, I took the class, and here I am. That was in 2003. So 21 years later, here I sit. So, but I'm not like the normal people. I think it was always there. I just didn't know what was happening, and I wasn't having so many experiences that I could say, I'm different.
Yeah. Well, and I think you bring up a really good point, and I'm the same way. I learned how to do woo-woo. I didn't have dead people chasing me as a child, or if I did, I wouldn't have known what to do with that. And now I teach people how to do it. We all come in with the ability. It's just a matter of developing and enhancing it. And I was led to this work 30 years ago to study it. And my family and friends were saying, why are you doing this? And I'd say, I don't know. And they'd say, well, what are you going to do with it? I'd say, I don't know. It's just interesting. And then, here we are all these decades later, and I swim in it every day and I love it. But that was a long time coming for me to get to this place. Sounds like it was for you too, although you were getting little inklings along the way. I don't know that I did get inklings along the way. One, maybe my girlfriend was injured in the Oklahoma bombing.
Oh, okay.
And so I saw it on the news. I was living in LA at the time. I saw it on the news, and I had this immediate reaction that Patty was injured. We've been friends since we were 10. We grew up together. And I knew she was injured, and I ran downstairs bawling, and I told my husband, and he said, well, have you talked to her? Have you tried to reach her? I said, no. And he said, okay, you're nuts. Just go try and call her. And I did, and she didn't answer her phone, and neither did her husband, who also worked downtown, and got a hold of the nanny, and she hadn't heard from him either. So then I really knew something was up.
Yeah.
So, yeah, that's the only thing that I can think of, that I just had a gut feeling that she was injured. And she was. She had dozens of stitches in the back of her head. And the interesting thing, though, Lisa, was she was on the national news that night being interviewed. And she's a lawyer, so of course she's eloquent. And she looked beautiful. She had on a skirt. I mean, the front of her looked amazing. And she said, yeah, but if you would have seen the back of me, there were these blood streaks all the way down the back of my pink suit jacket. And but she was on most of the networks, and I got to see her from LA, which made me feel better.
Yeah.
Because that was before we had cameras that we could use on our phones for FaceTime and stuff like that.
Yeah.
Okay. I want to talk about the galactic beings, and then I want you to give me any information. So galactic beings, you channeled a message about galactic beings and a new grid surrounding the Earth. Give us the cliff notes on that, please.
Yeah. So we're going through this crazy change. And so and actually I saw this grid. I think it was in 2016 or 17. I was doing a journey with somebody, and I saw this grid that was being formed at that time. And it looked like, I used to always call it like a fishnet. It was just this free-flowing net looking thing that was around the Earth. And they told me then that it was being formed. And at that time that it was starting to enclose on the Earth, and that at that time it was trying to help to push the negative dark energy out so that it wouldn't get trapped. And so then, I kind of actually have forgot about it. It's kind of like, yeah, whatever. Okay. I try not to hold on to anything that's going to happen in the future, because it just, I just kind of set it aside. But then all of a sudden stuff starts coming up about this grit thing coming back up again. And I had something told me that I needed to just ask what was happening. So now I remember, let me go back and refresh. So I think it was back in March. I got a message that the Akashic Records gave me a message that something was going to happen on September the 23rd. And my guides never give me specific dates. They'll give me like a roundabout time, but they won't say specifically. And they said September the 23rd. And I was like, that's weird. Why a specific
My mother's
day?
birthday.
Yeah, I was, yeah, but I thought it was just interesting because it was very specific. And they said something significant was going to happen. And so, okay. So then it starts getting closer and closer to, we're in August and it's like, okay, something's going to happen. And, we've had so many things happening with these solar flares, and the energy this year has just been unbelievably crazy, all of this stuff. And so it's like, okay, they said September the 23rd. I'm just going to ask them, give me a message on what's supposed to happen on the 23rd. And I was actually kind of testing them to see what they'd say. And they gave me an answer I wasn't expecting. But basically what was happening was that original grid the net that I saw in 2016, it firmed up. It's no longer a net, but it's a solid grid. And so the way that I was seeing it when they were providing the message was that it's basically working in conjunction with the Earth grid. And we understand ley lines in the grid that's within the Earth system. This grid is in the atmosphere. And so the way that I see it is like, okay, it's like, here's the Earth grid, and then here's this grid that's in the atmosphere. And it's causing I kept seeing it like a magnet. And so it's like an electromagnetic field that's between the Earth grid and this particular new atmospheric grid. And what it's doing is that the magnetism of this grid is basically in place to pull up this heavy, denser, low 3D energy and anything that's of that negative nature up to this atmospheric grid. And they're saying, and they're going to jump in. They're saying, what we want you to understand is that this grid was put in place in order to create a more harmonious atmosphere for all humans to live in. We want you to understand that the meaning and the purpose of this particular grid is to change the atmosphere of the Earth so that it can become more harmonious and balanced with all things. We want you to understand that the human nature is being sacrificed in order to create more love and peace so that there can be more harmony that exists within all things, and the spiritual consciousness will become more paramount in the human mind than that is of the disillusion. So basically what they're saying is that, we're sitting, us humans are living in an illusion. Disillusion is the way that they said it. Basically meaning that it's not real. It's just in this thing that we've created. And which again is all of this heavy dark energy, the 3D energy that's staying within us. And so as this grid has been put in place, it's helping to pull out all of this old heavy 3D stuff so that we can begin to see more clearly all of that old distortion and everything that we've already been talking about, these old belief systems and things, are getting removed from our system because of their heavy, denser energy. And it's allowing for this lighter, more balanced 5D energy to be penetrated within us. It's almost like it's opening more space for us to receive this love and compassion that's within this 5D energy. So there you go. That was the explanation of what I understood. And so if anybody has felt that they're feeling a little bit lighter, since I think they said it locked in on September the 22nd. So if you feel like you may be a little bit lighter in your energy field, it's probably why. That's helping anyway.
And where do galactic beings come into play, or do they? Or are they just using galactic as a term because it's an Earth thing netting outside of the Earth?
No, the galactic beings are who and what created this particular field. They're saying it's primarily the Lemurians that need to be recognized at this particular time, so that the humans understand that the Lemurians are also walking on the earth in order to create more balance and helped to construct this particular grid and put it in place.
Galactic stuff keeps coming up in my world in the last 10 days. I mean, almost every day there's something galactic, and I'm not an outer space kind of a gal that has been interested in it. I mean, I watch the movies and stuff, but it's not my wheelhouse. But it keeps coming up and coming up and coming up. I'm going, what is going on with that? Maybe I'm getting caught in the net of the galactic beings or something. Even to the point where we did a regression, a past life regression on the show earlier, a couple of months ago. And my question was, where did my interest in healing begin? And it was in a galaxy far, far away, over 100 billion years ago. And I mean, it was on this star and all this other stuff. I'm going, what? And then that kind of started this galactic thing that keeps coming into my focus here of there's more to the equation, and I know I'm being led to someplace around there, and I don't know that I'm going to wear a tinfoil hat anytime soon, but certainly there is something going on with that.
Yeah, because I'm the same way. I've never been interested in the galactic stuff, and like you said, I mean, just really over about the last 8 months, it just keeps coming out and I'm going, this is not me. I don't know where all of this stuff is coming from. And that's really why I'm paying attention to it, because I know this isn't my frame of reference. It's not how I'm more of that, let's just love one another kind of thing. I'm more of that spiritual type and not really of that galactic nature, but it has been coming up a whole lot. And so I really do pay attention to it because it's not something that I would normally think about.
Now, I would like a tour of Area 51.
Yeah.
It's just off limits, and it has the alien ships and stuff like that supposedly in it. I have a friend who's a retired Air Force colonel and flew in the Vietnam era. And I asked him one time, and he was a big deal in the Air Force. And I said, did you ever fly over Area 51? Did you ever get a tour? And he goes, no. And he said, we know if we fly over that and we don't have clearance, they'll shoot us down. And I said, what? They're going to shoot down their own plane? He goes, you bet they are. And I said, well, at least they're threatening it. And he said, no, it is totally off limits, which I find fascinating. Now that I find fascinating.
Yeah.
Yeah. All right.
If it's that off limits, you got to wonder what's going on.
Exactly. Yeah. I'm the kind of girl where it says keep out. I'm walking back there because I want to see what it is that they don't want me to see. Always. It drives my husband and my son nuts. They're like, you're going to get shot one of these days. I said, I'm not going to get shot. I just want to know. Yeah. So do they have a message for me? And also, in addition, one for everybody that's listening or watching today?
So they're saying, recognize that we'll give the message as a whole. So what we want you to understand is that the human race is going through a transition and a change that is elevating consciousness to a new way of being. We want you to understand that there's a rapid transition that is occurring at this particular time, and we want you to understand that all is moving well. We understand that the human concern of the chaos and the destruction is of monumental concern to many. But what we want you to understand is that as the humans evolve in a way that is more congruent with who we are, you'll begin to find more peace and love. If you truly stand in the truth of who you are as a human being, that is of the love and the compassion, you'll begin to recognize how the chaos will settle, and it will not be a part of who you are as an individual. But what we want you to understand is that the understanding of who you are must be broken down, and the old ways must be destructed. Understand that many of the old paradigms and the old ways of thinking are falling down in a rapid manner. And what I'm seeing is a bunch of brick walls that are just collapsing. And so what we want you to understand is that as these walls begin to collapse, it can cause chaos within the human being. we want you to understand that this is the normal procedure as the human begins to feel lost and confused in who they are and which direction to go. But what we want you to know is that all is well, and we will guide you into the path that is of least resistance and the fullest capacity of love. Life is changing in the human realm, and what we want you to understand is that all is well. Continue to move forward and gain the understanding and the confidence that the past can be set free and a new beginning is in store. Simply open the door and recognize that there is the field of love and harmony that awaits you if you simply let go of the past pain and sorrow.
Wonderful. That's beautiful. Yeah. Well, and you got to shatter the old in order for the new to come in.
Yeah. And it's scary for a lot of people to do that, let go of the only thing they know.
Yeah. It's kind of like when I was in my mid-20s, I had a friend that was 25 years older, and I'd be dating somebody and she'd say, he's Kool-Aid. And I'd say, what's that mean? He's Kool-Aid. He looks good. He tastes good. He smells good. Kool-Aid's enjoyable, but you got to empty your bucket of Kool-Aid in order for champagne to come in.
Yeah.
Because champagne's even better.
Yeah.
So, yeah, we laugh about that. I'll tell my little sorority girls, I was an advisor for many years, and I used to say, yeah, he's Kool-Aid. Say, what? All right, last question. Why do we incarnate?
What we want you to understand is that the ability to incarnate in numerous different ways, shapes, and forms is of the specific nature of the soul's experience. What we want you to know is that the soul must experience all different dimensions and levels of understanding so that it can become whole and complete in a way that is needed for it to transition and graduate to a different level of being. What we want you to understand is that all of the significant experiences that the soul goes through is much more than what the human mind can conceive of. But what we want you to know is that the soul is relevant in a way that must need and have the ability to transition into different forms of life and existence so that it can complete its specific path and become the master that is needed. And so again, the other thing is that we don't really think about, the soul being in so many different things, like being an animal or a plant or living in different, on different planets and being a grain of sand and all of these different things that the soul experiences, and for it to become a master, or that it really what the master is basically the teacher, or the guides can graduate to become a supervisor as well, some as a spiritual entity that creates the understanding and the oneness of all things as well. And so they're saying, so by having the different experiences, they have to have the good and the bad, the positive and the negative. They have to see all the different perspectives and different ideas of what life as a whole is. And so, when we talk about, having tragic endings to life, or having the human being that is just malicious and horrible, but then you have the other person that, is living the ideal life and has the perfect transition, that the soul has to know every single aspect of existence in order for it to be able to continue to move on its journey as well.
Beautifully said.
Good.
You're a fascinating woman. What a great conversation. My goodness. I have probably another hour at least full of questions for you, so we're going to have you back. You do such a magnificent job of simplifying complex thoughts and questions and, different ideas, not only through what you're channeling from the Akashic Masters, but also how you're able to then translate that into understandable languaging. So bravo on that. You really just excellent.
Thank you.
Wonderful. How can people learn more about you and your work?
You can go to my website. It's lisawetsel.com. And I do have a YouTube channel, which is Lisa Wetsel, Akashic Records Consultant. And there's there's videos and all kinds of stuff on both. I do have a membership platform that you can join on my website, and I have monthly classes and provide all kinds of fun information. So that's the best way to get a hold of me.
Okay, and we'll have all of that in the show notes as well. Alrighty, everybody, that's lots for you to ponder from this conversation today. In the meantime, sending you lots of love from Sweet Home, Alabama, mwah! And from Oklahoma, too, where Lisa is. We'll see you next time. To enhance your spiritual journey, click on one of the videos below and remember to subscribe, leave a comment, and share with your family and friends.